Sietse van der Woude, Senior Executive at the Minerals Council of South Africa, specializing or focusing on the modernization and safety aspects associated with their work. Well, Meneer, your panel is all yours. I'm down.
Thank you very much, Songezo. And good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for staying till the what is called the cemetery shift, not only the graveyard. So on the panel, I've got esteemed guests here, Maurice Madiba from the JSE, Pushpinder Singla from Vedanta, Errol Smart from Orion Minerals, who you saw earlier as well, and then Isaac Clarko from the IDC. So the topic you've heard, I'm going to start with a question to Pushpinder, and that is about the market dynamics. We've heard so much today about the growing demand for critical minerals. So my question is, how do you actually see the market dynamics changing, over the next decade, and how is your company responding to that?
Thank you very much, Sirse, and a very good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you very much, DMRE, for this opportunity to participate today. Let me just start with the basic when we talk about critical minerals. And when we talk about critical minerals, the critical minerals means which are very essential to the economy. But a word added to it is the supply may be disrupted. So that's the reason it's critical. So if I go back to our company, Vedanta, we are a very significant player in all the base metals. We are in aluminium, we are in zinc, we are in lead, silver, copper. We are in all the base metal, and we are a very significant player in all these commodities. But in the very recent time, with the climate change high on the agenda, as well as through the Paris Agreement, 191 member countries driving net carbon zero by 2050, the focus on the clean energy, hence the focus on some of the minerals like lithium, nickel, cobalt has gone up very significantly, and these minerals has become critical minerals. So I think that is the first context where we say it's depend upon the time which mineral is critical. And I think the panel member in the previous panel spoke about that the lithium, which was not an importance 10 years ago, has become so much important today only because of the change in the demand and supply aspect of the thing. Now when we talk about clean energy, the clean energy is driven by two key things. One is definitely moving from a engine vehicles to the electric vehicles. And the second bigger aspect is moving from a thermal based or coal based power to maybe a green power or renewable power. It can be the wind, it can be the solar. If I talk about how these markets are growing and how the dynamics are changing, if I talk about simply in the car market, the electrical vehicles was 5% of the total market share 2 years ago, which is today sitting at 14%. And the way it's growing, it will soon going to cross 30%, and as maybe replace in future 100%, that's the way it's moving. And similarly, if I talk about renewable power, whether it's a solar, wind, or the hydro, it is doubled up in the last 5 years in terms of how the transition has happened. And the most important thing is, one is we are moving away from the gas-based or coal-based to the renewable, or we are moving away from engine-based to the electric vehicles. But the usage of minerals into electrical vehicle is 5 times what we use for normally engine vehicles. Yeah. The second aspect, similarly, a wind power generation or wind power plant need 8 times mineral what a gas power plant needs. So accordingly, it's not only we are changing or moving towards clean energy, the new innovative ways need more minerals as well. And hence, we are seeing a very significant move into these minerals. If I can add from our perspective, as a Vedanta, as I mentioned, we are a very significant player into all the base metals. But with the change in the space where the demand for the critical minerals, the lithium, nickel, everything is going up, we as a company, firstly, have already entered into the nickel recently. We have already entered into the ferrochrome recently as well. And in terms of renewal, which is the bigger focus, as a company, mostly in India, we produce around 10,000 megawatt coal-based power. And our focus to replace it with 100% renewal, and we already started an initiative to replace 4,000 megawatt into very short term. So that, which is a very significant change moving from this. So I think these are the few initiatives our company is moving, but definitely we want to be a company which is very sustainable on this path, not only to extract, but also to beneficiate these minerals, as Errol has mentioned, that is the way the focus has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Pushpender. Maurice, as somebody who works with the market every day, how do you see the market over the next decade?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's quite an important thing that you've mentioned, that a lot of these critical minerals were not considered critical a few years ago, even a decade ago. But you know, 2 weeks ago, I drove my first electric vehicle in the country, and it was an experience that, you know, I still have to adjust to. In that car is in one gear. It just moves in one gear. But you can sort of see the consumption shifting in that general trend and saying consumers are looking for alternatives. They are looking for ways to be much more cleaner, much more sustainable. This is even from a retail perspective, but also when you consider some of the mining companies maybe looking at reducing some of their cost of production and using alternative energy sources. So there is definitely a shift in the market, and at some point we are going to reach a point of saturation and where there may be some oversupply of these minerals, and hopefully then reduce the cost and the pricing. As it stands, if I look at an ICE engine versus an EV engine and the cost of those two cars, one is significantly higher than the other, and the cost of operating is almost close to, particularly in South Africa, you know, the cost of your traditional ICE engines. But where you shift to markets like China that we see, in markets like the US, markets like Europe, where adoption of electric mobility is exceptionally high, and naturally the demand for materials and the demand for production has shifted off our shores and gone to those particular markets. And so even on my way up here today, I think there's an Africa Industrial Forum taking place on ground floor, but it's only Chinese companies that are there with machinery. So it's quite interesting to see that the beneficiation leg of these critical minerals, and in terms of how that will shape our market, also seems to be shifting away from Africa and SADC, and has really remaining with some of the dominant players that have been at it for years, you know, the likes of China, Korea, Japan, etc. And we see Europe trying to catch up significantly, but in the South African context, we still fairly behind, even from projects coming online perspective and from a funding perspective.
Thank you very much, Maurice. I think if one looks at the regulation, regulation can actually enable, you know, creating the shared value. So Errol, if I could maybe start with you and say, you know, how can African governments do or enable a regulatory framework that will not only be of benefit to the mining companies, but also to the African continent as a whole?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of the African countries are actually starting to do very well. If you look at Botswana and Namibia in particular, my bugbear is I'll carry on about the minerals cadastre till the cows come home, because that is a foundation. It's something that is a management tool. If you can't manage something, you can't control it. So, you know, we need to have, I think this whole concept of SADC and the Common Customs Union area is something that can be expanded. I think across the border between South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, there's a commonality there that needs to be expanded a little bit, particularly when you want to look at the beneficiation side of stuff. But at the end of the day, you've got to have access to the mineral rights, and investors need to be made to feel welcome. If investors are made to feel welcome, you look at what's happened to the Botswana economy with a massive capital investment that's come in. It's foreign direct investment that's coming. Namibia, the same thing's happening. We're missing that opportunity in South Africa. We're not even getting 1% of global exploration in South Africa, where we've got the mineral endowment. So I think things are starting to happen. They just happen too slowly in South Africa, unfortunately. And, you know, I speak to the colleagues at the DMRE who really are making a lot of efforts. But, you know, when I joked with the minister earlier on about where's our cadastre today, it's the end of August, I didn't get an answer. So, and I've had that same question and that same discussion for 3-4 years now. It's time for the answer.
Yeah, can understand that frustration that is there. So Isaac, from the IDC, you're a government-owned entity. And how do you see in terms of regulation and the regulatory framework that will enable you to be able to support the critical minerals boom better? What is it that you see is going to be necessary?
No, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, look, as I commented this morning, is that we should look at the whole effort of critical minerals and beneficiation as a regional and continental thing, and that is a start. So the law and the regulation must go with that imperative and aspiration. It must be streamlined. As I said, first, obviously, much as we endowed with these raw materials, the multiplier in the value will come into this beneficiation. I think that's what came out of here. So now, with that, it goes without saying that some of these key materials must cross borders. Obviously, what we need to share, we'll obviously have to share markets, as the two gentlemen are saying. The markets will be shared. The technology, access to technology, we'll have to share that. And obviously, with capital markets, with raising of the funds. So as we do that, I think if the system is harmonized, that the key critical materials within the law must allow that, to move from one country to the other. I'll just give a quick example in what we're doing. We started about 7 years ago to do EV battery and energy storage battery. So with eventually putting up a gigafactory in SA. So with that, obviously the 5-6 key materials are not all coming from SA. So we're getting graphite out of Tanzania and Mozambique and Madagascar. Lithium, we're looking at the DRC, obviously Zimbabwe and Namibia. Cobalt coming from the copper belt. So with all that at least in SA, what we have to give with that is that at least you've got a base where you can beneficiate. We've got the chemical industry to be able to support a venture like that. We've got access to technology with that. So now the raw materials must be able to come to one central point, whether it's SA or whether it's going to be Namibia, as the case may be. But yes, to answer your question in a nutshell is that let the legislation be in accord with the aspiration of a shared, of a joint beneficiation and value add. As you say, the more the value add, that is where the multiplier and the wealth creation comes from the resources. Yeah.
So the market dynamics is trending in the right direction, certainly over the next decade or so. But we're going to need that enabling regulatory and policy environment to actually enable that to be of shared value to everybody on the continent. I want to come a bit to the finances, which has been spoken about a lot today and in a previous panel as well. But Maurice, I know you are working very closely with other parties on this free what is it? The flow-through shares is the right wording. If you can just maybe explain to all of us here who are not into that financial, exactly how that works and what progress are you actually making in that regard?
So we're engaged in several discussions with the DMRE and by virtue of that, the Minerals Council as well of Geosciences and, the Council of Geosciences And we're discussing almost on a weekly basis. In fact, today we canceled our meeting for this conference. But we're discussing the concept of flow-through shares and how this could potentially aid junior miners in South Africa to be able to access funding for some of their activities. I mean, a lot of the junior mining activity and exploration, as you can imagine, is very risky. And so to attract capital, such a thing as flow-through shares, which is in essence a tax incentive, would certainly help companies then raise capital that they need to conduct the early stage activities that are required. This discussion, as far as I'm aware, is probably going to have to go all the way up to National Treasury. We've seen examples of flow-through shares work very well in places like Canada and Australia. And I think my colleague Patricia, who spoke earlier, is quite passionate advocate for the implementation of the same in South Africa. And what it entails is that the company that then is the operating company is able to go out, is able to explore, is able to then conduct or establish pilot facilities, and all of the expenses that they incur, in essence, then flow up to the shareholders or investors and become tax deductible on their, in terms of their taxable income. So it in essence is a tax incentive for the investor ultimately to then give money to or invest in companies that are doing exploration or junior mining activities and then be able to claim the tax deduction. So the operating company would in essence give those up to then raise the necessary capital. And so what that then converts to, in terms of investment in exploration and investment in pilot mining activities is, if it becomes commercially viable and feasible, then there's a requirement to raise additional capital in the markets and from a wider base of investors. And I think that's what we're looking to really activate in South Africa. We've got a lot of mining companies listed at the JSE. I think JSE's history and mining in South Africa are synonymous, but we need to see some emerging miners start to take shape and really start to contend and supply some of these critical minerals and also be listed with what I would call the big boys in the market.
So when?
I'm not sure if DMRE is here, but they may have a guideline for us. But we're generally, if proposals are submitted, which I believe one has been discussed so far, it would generally have to follow the budget speech. So if not next year's budget speech, hopefully then next year's midterm, if the powers that be gain comfort on the proposal that's being presented, that's something that really I think would stimulate this industry in a whole new fashion.
So Errol, you are the chairperson of our Junior and Emerging Miners Forum at the Minerals Council. Is this process going fast enough?
Nothing ever goes fast enough for a junior. Yeah, look, I'm glad it's got revived. It's a discussion that started 3 years ago, and for various reasons it fizzled a little bit. It's actually got new impetus, and I think it's important that the ministers paid attention to this, the MRE are paying attention to this. Previously, we ran it as an initiative from the Minerals Council. We did a presentation to Treasury on it. It's very important to understand that exploration spending and how it works is, if I get money from an investor today to do exploration, what do I do immediately? I hire drilling rigs, I drill holes, I pay diesel, I pay salaries, I pay laboratories. There's a whole lot of spending that immediately happens. Now let's analyze that. Diesel, 60% of every litre of diesel that you pay for goes straight back to National Treasury. So what have they lost by giving a tax break? Salaries, paying salaries. People pay PAYE. They take what's left of their salary after they've paid tax, and they go down the road and they buy groceries and they pay their bills, and the money flows back to Treasury because there's VAT, and the Spar shop and the OK make a profit and they pay tax. The value chain that comes from exploration, long before you've dug a single sod of earth out of the ground, is immediate. And if we, and that's what works in Canada and these places is, you know, National Treasury gives Maurice a tax break, so he gives me R1 million this year to spend on exploration. I have to spend it this year, by the way. I can't sit on it. I also can't go buy a Mabenzi and I can't go buy a house in Plet. I've got to spend it on specific exploration, on a specific project, on the prospecting works program that's been approved by the DMRE. So all of that, there's certainty. I spend it, and what you do in Canada is, if you get the flow-through share scheme, if you get $1 million of flow-through shares, you might have to invest $2 million additional dollars. So suddenly there's $3 million being spent in the town of Prieska this year on exploration. Suddenly the grocery shop, the tire supply place, the diesel supply place grows. That's how you grow an economy. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I'm just a dumb geologist. I try to build mines. But to me, these are the kind of things that can make a change. And if we get the spending in the ground, we'll show the minerals, we'll prove the minerals, and then we can take the economy forward.
Pushpender, from a major company, what financial incentives will make your job easier, to get the minerals out of the ground and at the same time bring benefit to the continent?
So let me say that from the bigger company perspective, when we take a decision to invest into a country, our 40% focus goes how the policies are certain in a country, how stable the political environment, how good the incentive framework in a country is there. And then 60% you focus on the quality of the minerals, you focus on the feasibility, you focus on the economic viability of the project. So if I talk about, especially largely in Africa, we are sitting on, like if I talk about Morocco, Morocco is sitting percent on 70% of the rock phosphate. If I talk about DRC, sitting at 50% of the cobalt. If I talk about South Africa, we are 90% platinum and maybe 35% of chrome as well. But from the investment attraction point of view, we are at the bottom of the list as Africa. Because I think the policy stability and the incentive framework is not as good as which investors can see into the other countries. So I think even in the earlier panel, there was a discussion when there was a mention about that we need to benchmark ourselves what other countries are doing and try to bring that incentive framework into our aspect. So that is a one area definitely there's a lot to improve and lot to work on. And I say it's not tough. It's more about creating a single window for approval, maybe creating a fast track mechanism to handle the investors. And I think that will attract a lot of investment into the country. The second bigger aspect when we talk about is the infrastructure, which is gone to whether it's a road infrastructure, whether it's a transport, and whether it's a electricity or power generation. And I say, as a country, we got the best coal resources, we got the best sun intensity, and we got the best wind velocity in the country. But despite of that, we are in a challenge of the load shedding. And that also a key criteria for industry to come and set it up. And a company like us, we would like to set up a beneficiation in this country from a long, because of we need to make sure we become the largest zinc producer, not only a concentrate producer, as Errol has mentioned, we should be a zinc metal producer, and we should serve not only Africa, even Europe and other countries. But the challenge we have, one is the power, availability of the power, and the second aspect is the pricing of the power. So opening this sector into the private, whether it's the electricity, whether it's we talk about transport, whether we talk about road, we should open up this sector to the private to bring more competitiveness, more efficiencies, more international pricing to make beneficiation more feasible into our continent. So I think that's the one thing I would like to add. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. So in terms of the financing, a very important issue, and one that we need to really get smart on how we actually make sure that there is financing for these initiatives, and so that we can get that shared value benefit. By nature, the shared value is about working together. It's about collaboration. It's about partnerships. So Isaac, from the IDC perspective, we've spoken about the market dynamics, we've spoken about the regulation and so on. In terms of moving on this journey as quickly as we possibly can, what collaborations, what partnerships do you think is important from your perspective?
Yeah, from the initiatives that we have, as I said, the partnerships obviously first will be in finance itself, in capital. As you said, let's approach capital markets with, let's say, a similar or same business case. You shouldn't be competing. Especially on the beneficiation side, shouldn't be seen to be as if it's competing while we are regional and that. So I think that the great partnership would be how do we approach especially international markets together. That as much goes with indeed the partnership in access to technology, sourcing technology. In SA, we do have a base of technology development over the years through the likes of Mintech, who I believe are here, the CSRR and others, and indeed some of the established mining houses in their own right. I think those are some on a technological aspect. I think we can share that with the rest of our partners in the continent through the IDC or private one-on-one. I think that is quite key. The business case, obviously, once you've got it right, from your raw material, from your mine, extraction, and through your beneficiation, and let's say finance, and indeed you have a company up and running, surely it all hinges on getting those markets. Yes, much as we all foresee that the critical minerals slash energy minerals, we're looking going towards 2030, 2040. There's going to be a huge uptake, but a collective also approach there will help, because there's actually quite a bit of spend on that side to develop the markets, to develop the right specification, especially of high-value products for these things that the likes of the Teslas or the Toyotas or the Mercedes-Benzes will be able to do. So there is actually quite a lot on that end in terms of R&D that goes into making this particular product. As I said, perhaps to illustrate the point, we're eventually looking at putting up a gigafactory in SA. But the way we've done it, we're saying, obviously there is mining. We can collaborate a lot more throughout the region. Then we've gone a lot more as the IDC and others into refining and extraction. We're investing quite a bit of funds in there. So now we have then taken a lead. We say once you refine, what is the next step towards your battery cell or your battery pack and eventual battery is the so-called precursor material, which is completely high-tech. And then in something like that, that is indeed, I don't see an ideal situation will be whereby if South Africa, for instance, has taken a lead in that particular direction, or it be Mozambique or whoever, it's not for Botswana to come and invest a whole lot of money trying to go through the very same step of precursor development, which is quite a lot of money. I think, as I say, in there, in sharing, in approaching the market, you don't just extract it, put it in a bag, boom, off it goes. There's a whole lot of technology, there's a whole lot of science that goes in there, and then yes, that collective approach will help, and that's what we try to foster and would like to see.
Fantastic. Errol, in terms of cross-collaboration with different countries in Africa, what do you think needs to be done to make sure that we get that maximum benefit?
Look, I think this discussion about the gigafactory, you hear a lot of muttering in the woods about the gigafactory that everyone wants here. So a gigafactory is just a gigawatt of renewable,
Energy.
modern energy And, you know, all your EVs, all your electric vehicles, all your electronics are built around this cluster. You know, South Africa has got a little bit of lithium, but Namibia, Zimbabwe, our partners, have got a lot of lithium. If you want to build lithium batteries, you need lithium, nickel, cobalt. We've got some, but we don't have all. Our partners in the region do. So if we want a gigafactory somewhere in the region, it's going to have to be a collaborative thing. What we don't want is that one of our partners in the region goes and signs a deal that all of their lithium or all their niobium or germanium or something goes off to some foreign shore, and then it leaves a hole in our own gigafactory, so we can't do it. So there is going to have to be some collaboration there. Power, you know, the DRC has hydroelectric power. We've got to get transmission into the district, into the subcontinent. So there is going to have to be collaboration to make this whole thing work. Otherwise, we're still just going to be digging dirt and exporting it, and then we haven't won the battle.
So collaboration is absolutely key. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And that's what we want to do with this critical minerals. Penda.
So I just would like to add, I think Errol has very nicely mentioned about that larger opportunity to collaboration within African countries. And I should say that today, as a Africa or as a South Africa, we are struggling, we don't have the beneficiation. But if I look at the China, they are beneficiating 73% of the world's nickel. They are doing 68% beneficiation of the world's lithium. And they are doing beneficiation of 50% of the world's cobalt. And recently, India has also issued their policy. They are looking 30 critical minerals. Now, one is collaborating within Africa and bringing all these minerals together. The second thing is collaborating with these major countries who are good in beneficiation. So instead of selling simply a dirt or selling the ore or a concentrate, how to collaborate with them so that you can get a finished product back from them as well. So that can also be done in a short term till we build our own beneficiation within the countries. Thank you.
Fantastic.
If I may also add, sorry,
Maurice, no problem.
to that, I think, you know, from an investor's perspective, it's quite difficult because ultimately you got to look at each country as its own kind of business. You know, South Africa is going about its own business. DRC is going about its own business. Zimbabwe, same thing, and Namibia, same thing. So that collaboration doesn't necessarily happen at a government level, but at a business and procurement level. And, you know, a lot of investors shy away from going to the DRC altogether. So if you were to think of investing capital in, say, a giga plant, you're not really going to get a lot of money to go and buy cobalt in the DRC, almost at all, unfortunately. Lithium in Zimbabwe is already on a fire sale. I'd say one of their biggest resources, which was Prospect Resources, just outside of the capital city, that was sold to the Chinese for about 300 million US dollars. Not that money really didn't touch local hands or even the local fiscus, you know, officially. So it's one of those things where we've kind of lost out on some of these minerals already, and they are going directly to where it's being beneficiated. As you said, China's doing 68%. I don't think China has a earth with any lithium in it, but they're producing that much. On the border of Botswana and Zimbabwe, there's also a lot of nickel that's ripe for processing, but that again isn't being developed because it's two separate businesses, two separate procurement lines. So one of those things is, how do you then force or bring the businesses together to collaborate and procure from one another, and then fund that as a collective? And I think it needs a lot of multinationals involved. Some DFIs with concessional funding is also going to be quite important. But if that doesn't happen soon enough, we'll probably be importing lithium metals, nickel sulfates, and all of those other things that we want for the plant, or just importing the finished material again.
Very good point. Thank you very much, Maurice, for that. I want to close this discussion. I think it's been a long day. I mean, clearly, as we said, the market dynamics are in our favor. We've got a bright future in terms of these minerals, highly needed, very well endowed in the African continent. I see each one of you on this panel as a visionary in your own right. You operate in a real arm of the art of the possible, looking and going where nobody, would be willing to go, so you do that. So I have a question for you just in closing to say, if there's one thing that changes between today and next year's 2024 summit, what is that one thing that you want to come to the summit and say, we've taken a step in a direction that's going to bring us this shared value from our critical minerals? I don't know who want to go first.
I'll go first this side. Yeah, look, on that, perhaps one can be philosophical and just quote Nike's motto, is just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just do it. The question with that, yes, I appreciate the summit. We attend a lot of conferences around the world. I think what we just need here is just that momentum, and wherever you are, humble with whatever you have. Just take one step forward. Approach the IDC, approach Vendetta, maybe an established company, approach somebody in there or a forum. Yeah, just do it. And then now we'll have taken the first step, and then come 2024, then we can have something to measure. Thanks, sir. That's my take.
Who else wants to go next? You're all going to answer the question. It's just when.
You know what I'm going to say?
Cadastre system.
Guys, if we want to get certainty, if we want to get the ball rolling, it's going to take equity investment. What makes equity investment flow? Yes, flow through share scheme works a little bit. It'll help. But people need certainty of ownership. They need to know when they apply for a right, they're going to get a right in a certain time, and they're going to be able to raise money and do work on it. It's no good that you go to an investor and say, listen, I've got the right to do this. And then the investor goes and looks and says, yeah, not quite. Your right isn't exactly right yet. We need to get that ball rolling faster. So colleagues at the DMRE, you can beat me up afterwards, but that is my Christmas dream.
Pushpinder?
So from my perspective, I say, and the one thing which is again very important to us as a company as well, and which we definitely would like to see is moving is in case of transmission and grid infrastructure, because we as a company are ready to put whole solar and wind just behind our land, but because of the Northern Cape is constraint of transmission and grid capacity, we are not able to proceed with that thing. So that is the one thing I say, if we can see the ball moving in this year, definitely I think that will be great to us. And that is going to create a lot of positive benefit, adding a lot of renewable energy to the grid back, and definitely helping with the load shedding as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maurice?
Yeah, for me, it's quite simple. I think seeing some technology come online that's developed locally, and that would be essentially cooperation and an MOU of some sorts between, it would be Mentec, CSIR, Council of Geosciences, and really them putting together or coming together as, intellectual minds and researchers, and making some of that technology available for commercialization and for junior miners, for established companies, etc., because we have the technology, it's there. We have the research, it's there. In fact, the first lithium battery is actually made in South Africa at CSIR in the world. So it would be just for me to see that signing ceremony with the CEOs of these different organizations and saying we've come together to put our minds together around these critical minerals and, come commercialize the research and the technology.
Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our session. The organizers have asked me to end with a bang. On last week Friday, you saw what the Springboks did with the All Blacks. And it shows that we've got winning blood running through our veins. So I'm going to ask you to all stand up and go with me and say, Viva Critical Minerals, viva! Viva Africa, viva! Viva! Thank you very much.